where those who've been displaced are sheltering. On Friday, the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to immediately halt its military operation in Gaza's most southern city.
Hello. Hello. Good afternoon. And welcome to the show. A bit of a weird one. Russ is unwell, so I'm going to be filling in. I'm just moving to another room because, as you can see, I'm actually in a radio station at the moment. Hello. Now, I just have to tell a colleague something, so bear with me for a moment. And welcome to the Midday Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I can see our guest. We have a guest in the green room. Going to be joined by the lovely Liz Saul in just a moment. Who's going to be stepping for us. And I'm moving into the kitchen at said radio station. God, I'm such a radio tart, aren't I? All over the place. So, welcome. I am looking forward to inviting our guest on in just a moment, and we are having a little bit of trouble with the tech, which is interesting, but we will see what happens. I'm just trying to work out how to add this in, because I can see we've got a guest in the room. And at the moment, it doesn't seem to be happening. So what we do, we get Liz logged in, and she'll be able to add the guest, which will be fantastic. Yes, indeed. So thank you for bearing with me at the moment. This is a bit of a last-minute thing, and I'm sorry this looks terribly unprofessional, but not to worry. We will find our way through it. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to move into another room and very quickly add the guest on another machine. I'm going to see what happens. So bear with me. You're on a live tour of Radio Jackie. Bear with me. Hello. Yes. Would you mind if I just press one button on there?
Come on through.
Thank you, and I will get the hell out of your way. My esteemed colleague, this is Mr. James Gaffney here. Esteemed colleague of mine. Hello.
Hello, Ron.
Very, very sickeningly talented up-and-coming DJ, this man. Sickeningly. Right, I'm going to stage, and then I'm actually going to log out of that. There we go. So that won't interrupt your show, James.
Hello.
And we say good afternoon to Roy Shepherd. Hello.
Hello there. How you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. This is absolute organised chaos, but I'm going to go and sit myself in a quiet place, and then I can give you the attention and professionalism that, frankly, you deserve.
Thank you so much.
But a bit of a last-minute thing. Today. I'm finished another show at midday, so it's like changing over, hot seat changeover. Right, welcome to the Midday Show. How are you?
Very well, thank you very much indeed. Enjoying a bank holiday that isn't really a bank holiday, is it? For us.
Well, indeed, because it's not rained yet, but we promised some rain tomorrow. What, apart from appearing on chaotic radio shows, what have you been up to on your bank holiday?
Well, I've been planting about 200 dahlia plants.
Wow, are you obviously a very green-fingered man?
I'm a green. Well, actually, I had this moment, and I shouldn't do this, but I cleaned my hands, but they're not really worthy of close-up. So please don't go in too close.
We're not here to touch. And you're a better man than me, because I just sow wildflowers in my garden because they look nice. They're eco-friendly. But you're a better man than me. What brings you to the Midday Show?
Well, I've been invited to talk about the importance of human connections in this world of AI and algorithms, and why the next 10 to 15 years will be very relevant to the next generation of workers, and perhaps for people who've been around a bit longer, where they need to understand the threat. But there are things that you can do. In the last century, after I finished a long radio and TV career myself, I became a speaker talking about the topic of networking well before it was something that people talked about. And I wrote a book in 2002 called Meet, Greet and Prosper. It's been updated 6 times, and it's just been turned into an audiobook seeing as I was a voiceover for so many years, it just made sense for me to do the audiobook of it. And it literally comes out tomorrow, actually.
Oh, well, perfect timing for you to be on the show, and we can certainly plug that and give people a place to go and download that later on. So let's hear about all this book. I suppose it must have had a lot of.
You're breaking up a little bit, Nick, I have to say.
Technology changes so quickly, I suppose. Is that right? And you can bring it up. Oh, hang on. I said you must have to update it an awful lot because technology changes so fast.
I don't think it's the technology that has changed. I think
with the latest innovation in technology.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we can do this is something that we could never have done ourselves years ago. I mean, when I was at the BBC, I used to self-op in Vision, which for people in the know will realize that, you're vision mixing and doing all of that sort of stuff like you do on the radio now and have always done. But, I've been doing this topic for so long, and I've found that it has evolved because society has evolved, not necessarily the technology.
Yeah. I'm just reeling that you do self-op in Vision. How on earth did you do that? I mean, it's one thing in radio, but in Vision, that's quite a skill.
It was a long time ago, actually. I might actually have a picture of it. Actually, can I just put it on the screen?
Yeah, if you can.
I can't, not with the techie stuff that's been going on today. Let's just see. There you are. That's a self-op BBC studio in Bristol back in the day. So the big black hole in the middle of the screen there was where the camera stuck its nose through the glass. And those are all of my vision mixing and all the preview monitors I had, et cetera, et cetera.
You can almost tell the year, number one by the equipment and two by the hairstyle.
Well, it's funny you say that, because back in the day when I was doing that work, I was working for a guy called Pat Morley, and he was the head of news at BBC Bristol in those days. And I didn't think I was going to be doing it for very long. And I had very long hair, and I had to use an elastic band to tie my hair back. And he jokingly said to me one day, "If you ever turn to the side, you're fired." You're broken up again.
Oh, I think we've frozen there for a moment. Can you hear me? Yeah, sorry.
Yes,
we have this
now.
Tech troubles from time to time, which is ironic given what we're talking about. You had very long hair and you had to tie it back. So I suppose we'll get...
Yeah, unfortunately, it sort of did all the growing and stopped growing about 20 years ago. So
tell us all about your book.
Right. Well, Meet, Greet and Prosper was really an attempt to help people with the social part of meeting people. And Meet, Greet and Prosper was based on a lecture that I used to do all over the world, actually. I mean, all over Europe and the US and Asia. And it was aimed primarily at professionals, consultants, people like that, who have to meet people for their work. And it really became very clear to me early on that so many people struggle walking into a room of strangers. And a lot of it is about social awkwardness and social anxiety. We have an epidemic of it happening now for young people in particular, post-pandemic, because they didn't have the opportunity to socialize when they were in their late teens, and now they're in their early 20s. People go out of their way not to meet people. They will do it digitally. So I also came to realize there are two types of people. There are introverts and extroverts. And the extroverts have no problem walking into any room anywhere because they love and get energized by meeting people. Whereas introverts are the deeper thinkers, and they often really struggle with it. They know they need to do it, but they don't necessarily do it.
Now, this is interesting and ironic in a way, because the world is now more connected than it's ever been. And yet, more and more people are feeling more disconnected than they ever have. right? So I'll be interested in your thoughts on that as a prolific networker, as an expert on the subject. First of all, why? And then obviously your book's going to give us some solutions to that. Why do you think that's happened?
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, the pandemic really didn't help. People just became so lacking in confidence. They felt uneasy. I mean, I was working with a guy who is an eminent endocrinologist. We were at a medical congress, and it was soon after the pandemic. And he said, do you know, I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm just not used to meeting people anymore. So experienced people were struggling, but younger people, as I said earlier on, have been struggling for different reasons. And actually, there's a very good analogy, because about 10 years ago, I wrote a book which was personal development for single people. And back in those days, you know, the internet and dating apps and stuff were relatively new, but they've now become so part of youth culture that people connect digitally. They don't connect face to face.
Right.
And then on top of that, in America especially, you have a situation now where guys feel that if they ever approach anybody with the desire for a date or whatever, male or female, whatever it is, they're afraid of coming across as a bit of a creep. So you have that combination of people don't have the emotional fitness and the experience to be able to do it. And then you have the technology that we rely on far too much. And I have a feeling that the dating world especially is imploding in America. And they say that if it happens in America, 5 years later, it will happen here. But I think with the acceleration of technology, it'll happen a lot sooner. And what the dating apps are finding is that people are just saying, this doesn't work. I don't want anything to do with it. But people aren't engaging with people face to face. They don't know how to do it. So these basic social skills have been lost literally within the last 5 years. And I think that's important on a social level, but professionally, it's also incredibly important. You know, we have a situation now where people have been sort of educated to believe that we live in a meritocracy and, you know, your qualifications are the only thing that matters, et cetera, and they don't want anything to do with what they call nepotism, which I'll come back to if you let me. And we've got a situation now where the next generation of people coming into the world of work don't understand the value of human connection, and they're up against AI and algorithms and stuff as well.
So it seems that the deck is stacked against them. Can I just interject here very briefly and say, Liz was meant to be co-presenting this with me, and I think she's having trouble getting on. Just message to Liz, if you log in to StreamYard using my email address, and I can and password, or just log in with Google. If you need to log into StreamYard one way or another, Liz, if you do that, then you can add yourself, and please do. Back to the conversation. It's because an algorithm or clever technology will not replace emotional connection, but this is not a new idea. I mean, I remember back in the 90s when Daniel Goleman brought this to our consciousness.
Emotional intelligence.
Right. So this is nothing new, and it seems to be eroded, surely.
I think what is new actually is how people have been sold the idea that digital connection is enough when in fact it's not. And, you know, you have a lot of large corporations have very robust recruitment processes, for example. And, you know, yes, that's a good thing, but the human connection and introductions are the thing that very often get stuff started. I mean, my own partner has a 22-year-old son, and he said, I don't want nepotism. I want to do this myself. And she actually had a connection that got him into working for a human rights law firm because he wants to go into that area. And he said, I don't want to work in London. But after a week of working with that firm, he said, it changed my life. But it was the connection that got the introduction. And if I may, can I just show the difference between nepotism and connections?
Please do.
Nepotism is where, through your family connections or whatever, somebody who is not suited for a role gets a job because of the connection. Whereas what I'm talking about is somebody who has a connection with a trusted relationship that says, I know somebody that you need to meet.
Yeah.
Let them have a conversation.
Well, that's networking. That's
that is network. Exactly. That is networking. And I have been a self-employed freelancer for 45 years. And if I may, I'll tell you a story about how I got into radio. All right. I'm sure that you've got a story. I had sent out 200 letters in those days. I mean, they were letters, not emails. So it tells you it's a long, long time ago. And I got really down about it. I'm very depressed about it. And I went home to my parents in West Wales, in Pembrokeshire. And my mum said, what's the problem? I said, well, I've sent out all these letters and it's just got me nowhere. And I don't know what to do because I so want to work in broadcasting. And my mum said, oh, you need to speak to my cousin Phil. And I said, who's your cousin Phil? And she said, oh, he's a director at the BBC in Cardiff. And I thought, why on earth didn't you tell me? And she said, you never asked. So he got me into the BBC in Cardiff. And just before I had my show round in the studio, he said, come with me. I'd like to introduce you to somebody. And he introduced me to a guy called Dewi Smith. And Dewi Smith was a senior producer at BBC Radio Wales. And we had a very polite conversation. It didn't really matter or didn't really sort of amount to a great deal. It was very polite and stuff. But a couple of weeks later, I got a call from a producer at BBC Wales called Jack King, who's still a producer. And he said, I've got a spot that I need filling for a Saturday breakfast show. Could you come in and could you audition for it? Because Dewi said that you're keen to, work at the BBC. So I go into the BBC, and for the first time in my life, I face a BBC console, which for people who aren't into broadcasting won't know the difference here. But everywhere in the world, when you open a fader, you push it away from you. But at the BBC, when you open a fader, you pull it towards you. It's a really weird thing, and it does your head in. So I did this audition, and
I've heard this. That would freak me right out because you're right. It's the only place, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's a behind the scenes sort of story, but it'll give you some idea of how much it freaked me out. But he was brilliant. He was great. That was on a Monday night. On the Tuesday, he called me and he said, you've got the job. So I started on BBC Radio on the Saturday because my mother knew somebody called Phil Lewis who gave me the introduction. I told that story once at Tower Hamlets Council, and somebody in the audience sort of put up his hand to object. And he said, I just can't believe that you're proud of your nepotism story. And he didn't realize that it wasn't a job, it was a gig. And from that gig, I got asked to do so many other things, and it led to so many other BBC jobs. I mean, I'm about to share something that will impress you. All right, being a radio man, a voice man, this is going to impress you, but you won't want to appear impressed. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, okay.
For many years, I was one of the people that read the letters on Points of View. So I was the guy that said, dearie, dearie, dearie. And I got that through a connection of somebody I met at the BBC, blah, blah, blah. So this is how it works. Now, I'm talking about show business.
I'm impressed with that. That's really cool.
Yeah. But you see, these stories, everybody in broadcasting has got these stories, but it's not about broadcasting. This is to illustrate how most of the meaningful developments we have in our careers usually come from a connection, not from your qualifications. Your qualifications are important. Your experience is important.
I've seen this in my own career and life before. I've seen really talented people with great qualifications not get the jobs I thought they should. I've seen not so good people that maybe shouldn't have got the job, but
I've lost you, Nick.
Sorry about that. And also, I agree, because a lot of the time I got my job at Capital through a connection. It wasn't anything to do with qualifications. There was no CV you could have that would get you a job at Capital. I just just happened, if you believe in that, or synchronistically, if you believe in that, happened to meet someone who knew someone who knew someone. And I found it with people that I've mentored and trained. You know, they got the opportunity through knowing me, you know, and it wasn't anything to do with their qualifications. And when you meet people face to face, you can get a measure of the person.
Well, that's the thing. It's really about, do you trust this person to not make me look stupid? And that applies in every career, you know? So, you know, back in the day, I mean, I brought this specially. This is not available anywhere anymore, but I wrote this book many, many years ago. And
So,
while I was...
I know
Sorry?
so many people that would tear that out of your hand working where I do, I can tell you.
Yeah, I know, but it's really, really old. It's completely out of date. But I got in touch with Johnny Beerling, who was the head of Radio 1 at the time.
Yeah,
and I said, he didn't know me from Adam, but I said, would you write the foreword for it? And he did. He wrote the foreword for it. When the book came out, I made a point of going to Radio 1 to present it to him face to face. While we were having a chat, he was really impressed with the book, and he said some lovely things. He read the manuscript and stuff, but he said, do you have an agent? And I just started reading the news on BBC TV in London for the South East News, for a program that was called London Plus back in those days.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I don't have an agent. And he said, would you like to have one? I recommend you get one. And I said, well, yeah, great. Who do I speak to? He said, hang on a second. He picked up the phone and he rang an agent. And he said, I've got this guy. Will you see him? And she said, yes, of course. He was the controller of Radio 1. Are you going to say, no, get lost?
No, exactly.
Anyway, I didn't know this, but later I discovered that she was absolutely the presenter's agent in the UK. Her name was Jo Gannett. She had Terry Wogan, Steve Wright, Gary Davis, you name it. Everybody was on her books.
Yeah.
So when people later talked to me about, well, you know, do you have an agent? I said, yeah. Who is it? Jo Gannett. Doors opened. And that's the power of A, the connection, and B, credibility, authority, and trust. So this is what I'm trying to say.
And all these things still exist today. I currently work for the BBC, and despite all its trials and tribulations, it's still very much an enormous beast, and it moves along as it does. It's still about who you know. It's still about making those connections. And actually, it's really important. My grandmother, who was very senior in the civil service, she always said it costs nothing to be civil. And I hold that every day, my whole life. And actually, it really works. Even if people are really horrible to you, if you can just stop and stay calm, it makes a hell of a lot of difference. And particularly in the BBC, which is now worldwide. I remember being in California. I didn't know anyone at all. We happened to notice that the late Michael Jackson was on trial in California. And I went there and I said, I know so-and-so who works. I worked at ITN at the time. And they said, oh, this person knows you, because I worked for a world news organization. When I then went back and I was in Texas, I was working for the BBC by then. Oh, my cousin works for the BBC. Come in. The Americans are notoriously rubbish about letting people have days off. They only get 2 weeks statutory holiday. We get at least 4, and then bank holidays and various things. We're very lucky. But because I happened to go over there, and my cousin said, oh, my cousin's visiting from London and she works for the BBC. Oh, take the day off. We'll pay you. Don't worry. Go and spend time with her. And it was just because I worked for the BBC, because I was so polite and British to him.
Well, I think if you step back and you say, okay, the BBC is a monster of an organization. When I was there were about 28,000 people worked for the BBC. I know it's about nothing like that now. Oh,
no,
right?
It's still about the same. And in fact, during the pandemic, those were the figures. It was a little bit less. It was sort of 27,000. But they made a point of saying, that's 27 odd thousand worldwide, and most of us are working from home. I was one of those, because I'm a broadcaster, I always have been. I was one of those who still had to go into the office. So, but yes, they made a point of saying that the 27 odd thousand worldwide. And again, it's interesting because in local radio, there's been restructuring going on, but nobody has actually lost their job apart from a few people in television, but they've sort of eventually been redeployed elsewhere. So it's still around the same amount of people worldwide.
It is fascinating what you say, Roy, that, and I think we're fairly established now with everyone listening and stuff, I would imagine as well, that yes, it is the connections that make the difference. That's the difference that make the difference. And the digital world, digital world, I suppose, is a fantastic servant, but a terrible master. And
digital is very good at helping you stay in touch with people.
Yes.
And so use it in that way, but don't try and use it to make those key connections.
What it could never do. So, for people listening now and they think, yeah, I see value in this, I see merit in what Roy is saying, but let's say, just fictitious example, they've got no connections at all. Where do they start to build this network that's going to help them in the future?
All right, first thing, plug time. Go to meetgreetandprosper.com and listen to the first 7 minutes of the audiobook. That's probably the best start.
Excellent.
Meetgreetandprosper.com.
Plug away.
All right. Meetgreetandprosper.com. All right. So you don't have to sign up for it. You just click on it and you can listen to it. I mean, if I may, I'll take issue with what you just said.
You may.
Everybody has connections. People we went to school with, people we went to, well, as in my case, went to Sunday school with, you know. So it's all of those connections. It's all our friendships. It's everything. But more importantly, I think it's the friends and the connections of everybody we already know. So, you know, one of the things that I say in the audiobook and the ebook is, when is the best time to plant a fruit tree? So I'd like your answer, Liz, and also from you, Nick. When is the best time to plant a fruit tree? Sorry?
Neil.
Sorry, what did I say, Nick?
Sorry.
Sorry.
I've been called a
Nick,
lot.
get everybody's name right. That's a critically important part.
I'm not networking with you anymore. I'm done.
All right, so the question was, when is the best time to plant a fruit tree?
I'd say sort of maybe March time, right at the beginning of the spring, because you might still have a little bit of cold weather, but you're getting it the best. No, okay. That's why I'm a journalist and not a gardener.
Right, I'm going to say something completely random, a complete guess, because it's going to be a bit of a trick question. December.
No, the answer I'm looking for, and I've only ever had this correct answer twice in all the years I've done the lecture.
Shall I have another go?
No, because you might get it right and you might spoil the punchline. So the people who've only ever got it right twice had already heard my lecture. And the correct answer I'm looking for is 10 years ago.
Oh.
Why 10 years ago? Because a fruit tree takes 10 years to bear fruit. Your network will take 10 years to bear fruit. And once you've got your network established, the fruit that you get from that will last your entire career. So, you know, the earlier you do it, I mean, I've lost count of the number of people who've come up to me at the end of the lectures that I used to do. I don't do it anymore, saying, oh my God, I wish I'd heard this 10, 20 years ago, because it would have had a profound impact where you take the collection of people seriously, and it's not just for yourself. It's for the benefit of everybody else in your network.
I do notice that, actually, if I recommend something or signpost something to someone, I love the phrase, all true benefits are mutual. And I really believe that in whatever kind of relationship you're in life, if it truly benefits one, it will truly benefit the other. It's the win-win style of doing things, or the harmonious style rather than win-lose, which I don't like particularly.
Absolutely. Well, funny enough, I've just seen Paul's comment here about, you know, local radio is a community, which is a lifeline that relies on human connection. Well, actually, it's not just BBC Local Radio. It's life. It's all about life. And we let it happen just by chance. And what I'm saying in Meet, Greet and Prosper is you don't have to let it go to chance, especially if you err on the side of being an introvert, where you don't feel comfortable walking into a room of people that you don't yet know. I mean, the mindset shift that I try and imbue in people is, strangers are just friends that you haven't met yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although equally, you wouldn't tell them all your darkest secrets right away.
Well, it depends how late in the evening it is.
Drunk, yes.
Yes, indeed. Actually, you make an interesting point, Roy, because Russ, who should have been on the programme today, is very poorly. Russ, we wish you very much speedy recovery of this vicious bug that's going around at the moment. But he and Neil first met sort of 30 years ago, nearly, at Capital Radio in London. And their friendship, both professional and personal, has endured all that time in and out, and sort of, oh yes, I could ask Longie, or oh, Russ would know that. And to this day they're great friends, they help each other out. I'm very fortunate I first met Russ when I was a spotty 16-year-old doing work experience, which I'm sure he doesn't wish to be reminded of, but he's come to be a good friend and a wonderful professional to work with.
But Liz, here's the really important point that you've just made, is that it was just work experience, but it changed your life.
Yes. I must say I'm very pragmatic when I say these things, because I worked very hard to taking on the point that you did. I would never say I'm an introvert, particularly when it comes to my work, but I've always been very professional and worked very hard. And I mentioned my grandma, but there were people that, my mum's a political journalist, and when I was growing up, I talked to her contacts, and she and I never shared a surname, so there was no hint of nepotism. But I sort of said, well, what is the best thing to do? And I got to know these people that knew her, and that all helped as well.
But you also asked questions. You were open to learn. You were respectful. You were all of these things. And the great thing about networking, when you get networking, is it's not about selling yourself to somebody. It's about creating an environment where somebody knows, likes, trusts, and respects you, so that wherever you go, people will say, oh, I've heard about you. And it's a good thing. So that will open the door. If I may, this is a spoiler alert. It's a story at the end of the audiobook. So at this rate, you won't need to listen to the audiobook. But I used to be on TV in London doing the early evening news for BBC for a long, long time. And there was an end of show party. And it was back in the day when Lime Grove was where the TV studios were.
Oh, wow.
And, it was a great party, and we were getting on really well. And I was chatting to the husband of one of the journalists that I used to work with on a daily basis. And he worked in radio, and we were chatting, and we'd had quite a bit to drink. And, and he said to me, Roy, he said, you love radio, don't you? And I said, I love radio. It's just so intimate. You can open a fader and talk to people and stuff. And he said, well, I'm at LBC. And I went, oh, wow. And I said, I've got an idea for a chat show. I said, who should I pitch it to? And he said, send it to me. And he said, I'll pass it on to the relevant person. I thought, oh, fantastic. Brilliant. He gave me his card, and I put it straight in my pocket. And we carried on and had a great night. The following day, it was about lunchtime when I surfaced, I have to be honest with you. And I turned out my pockets, and I found his card.
Phew. And I thought you were going to say you put it in the wash without looking. I was getting worried.
I looked at his card, and it said, and this is true, Robin Malcolm, Director of Programs, LBC.
Wow. Fantastic.
And I phoned him up, obviously, and he said, come in, have a chat. So I went in, had a chat. He commissioned 28 primetime 1-hour chat shows on the basis of that. That's how easy it could be. I wasn't trying to sell. I was just being enthusiastic about the medium that I spent years working in.
And I think enthusiasm
produced by television.
I mean, and that's it. It's organic, isn't it? It's very natural.
All the right words. You're saying know, like, trust. I mean, I remember reading a book by a really good marketer, if that's not an oxymoron, but he's one of the real good guys. And there's all the marketing hype and all that sort of thing. We see it every day. But Liz, do you want to put Roy in the middle and we go on the side to swap the pictures?
I'm trying to.
Because it comes down to knowing, liking, and trusting. So if people are going to buy from you, it's just in this case they're buying you, not a particular product that you're selling. But it's the same principle, and it's the complete other thing I picked up on. It's the complete opposite of the competitive mindset. You know, got to beat other people. He who dies with the most toys wins. All of that BS. You know, it's the complete opposite of that. But it works. It works.
I think the secret for me about networking is how you can help other people look good. So if you go in with a mindset of you're looking for opportunities for other people, your reputation will precede you. And one of the other questions I ask is, you know, do you brighten a room when you walk in or when you leave? You know, and ultimately, you know, we could make a list of the people who brighten a room when they leave, and they think they're being really clever very often, and they're not. And I think if you take this side of your life, either personally or professionally, more seriously, your career can really get transformed. As I said earlier on, I've been self-employed for 45 years, and every opportunity has come through.
And it doesn't. I love what you're saying, because it's not like, if I could sum it up in 4 words: work smarter, not harder.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Work smarter, not harder. You've removed the struggle component. You've removed the competitive component and replaced it with collaboration and ease. Now I know which one of those two I would rather choose. I mean, I did it last night. I was doing a comedy set. Probably brightened the room when I walked off the stage. But
oh, you're very harsh on yourself.
You've got to laugh. Hey.
No, it did.
I was at the comedy spot, and he tried new material. It was very good.
And I noticed there was a chap there called Henry. He did a set, and he talked about something that I've talked about with my 2 co-presenters at Radio Jackie, Emily Kate and Chloe Norman. And I said, why don't you come on the show and talk about that? And again, this is the example. Absolutely effortless. He would love to do it. So he's going to come and have a chat about the ick, which is something we were joking about. And he was in his set. It's given him an opportunity. We'll plug his gigs. That gives him an opportunity. Also, this show, particularly on the Wednesdays, is about mental health and well-being and all that sort of stuff. He's very into that. Bang, bang, bang. The whole thing expands. And next time I walk into a comedy room and he's there, we've got an immediate connection. We're friends now, if you like.
You also understand the pain that you both go through when you stand in front of that microphone. I mean, It takes an enormous amount of courage. So anybody who does that gets instant respect anyway.
Yeah. Unless you're another comedian, because they're all jealous of each other.
Oh, no, not at all. I recognise that it takes a lot of courage to stand up in front of people, because, you know, as a radio presenter in particular, even to some extent as a TV presenter, you might be in front of a camera or in front of a microphone, but you can't see your audience. And suddenly when you go out, whether it's DJing, stand-up comedy, or after dinner speak or anything like that, where the audience is there and you've got an instant reaction, you suddenly think, oh, shit, this better be good. I better remember everything.
Today is the day we get found out.
Haven't been so far.
I remember a friend of mine, she was very, very shy and had the social anxiety. And I gave her the advice to walk into a room and find something that she could appreciate about another person, or something, like you say, something to help them. And then she's not trying to get something, and it also helps her feel that she's got something. She's got something to give, and it's just opening that door just a crack, isn't it? It's all about the rapport with that person and all that.
Well, that is in Meet, Greet and Prosper, actually.
I met some great people at networking meetings. Again, to back up your example, I met a lovely lady who was on the show a couple of weeks ago called Anita Wisdom, just by coincidences. And I met her at a networking meeting, and we've kept in touch ever since. And I'm sort of very interested. She does a lot of spiritual and healing work, and it's great. Another door opens. So tell us more about your book.
Okay, well, it takes you through every stage of why you need to connect. And we've talked a little bit about that. I think it's so incredibly relevant to people coming into the workplace now who think that it's their qualifications. I mean, I used to lecture at places like Cranfield and Henley on the MBA courses, and I was brought in to tell the students, who were all grown-ups, I mean, they weren't kids, to say, look, your MBA is the starting point. It's not the end point. It's who you connect with here, who you connect with in the future. It's that important.
By them, people
Sorry?
Was that well received by the academics that think it is all about qualifications and what's on paper? Did you get any resistance to your message at all?
Well, now it's very interesting you say that, because I saw the feedback from my first lecture to all the students, and they were from all over the world. I mean, Cranfield is a renowned business school. And my feedback, maybe I shouldn't tell you this, was 8.5 out of 10. And I was gutted. I thought, ooh, that's not good. And I went to the tutor who brought me in. Actually, I said, Steve, I'm sorry if I let you down. He said, what are you talking about? I said, 8.5. And he said, the course average is 6.5. You nailed it totally. And that was the very first time I'd done it. So, and I think the reason it was nailed is that the people in the audience realized the authenticity of it and the wisdom of making people the center of what you do. Yes, you've got a foundation of understanding anything and everything to do with business, but understanding what makes people tick is really important.
Because people,
So that's the first part, which I think is a fundamental. And then it takes you through every stage, how you choose the events you go to. What do you do when you walk in the room? I always say get there early, because then you can meet people as they come. Yes. How you initiate conversations, how you end a conversation with a bit of style and panache. What do you do to follow up? And how do you do it in such a way where people are pleased to hear from you when you do get in touch? So there is quite a process. And I mean, the book,
here's an interesting point that I'd like to put to you, Roy, is it's all very well when you want to, you need to network and you're making those connections and, expanding your horizons, particularly in a career. But on the flip side, how do you exit that conversation if somebody is a bit uncomfortable, if you know that they're not going to serve you any purpose, or perhaps there's something not quite right? Because actually in the workplace, we have to deal with that flip side as well, not just in the workplace either.
I mean, there are 2 points to the answer to that one. The first one is that you don't meet people looking for something that you can personally get from it. You meet people with the view to who within your network would benefit from knowing this new person. That's the first mindset. And I think the second one is, and I joke about it, sometimes you realize why that person was standing alone and you introduced yourself and you wish you hadn't because they're a smelly person or whatever. But what you do is you actually bring the conversation to a close. You say, this is a networking event. I'd like to meet some other people. You can volunteer to introduce them to somebody else without you actually needing to know who the other person is. There is a way of doing it, and I sort of go into the detail.
Kind of speed dating version of networking, if you like.
Except it's been around far longer. It sometimes just needs somebody such as Roy to say, actually, this is how it works, and this is the best thing to do.
Excuse me, I'm going to network because it's a, like you say, networking event.
I mean, I think the word networking has got a bad press, and deservedly so. I mean, I remember meeting a guy, and his opening words to me, and this really did happen. He just looked at me and he said, "What would your wife live on if you were to die suddenly?" Any guesses what profession he was in?
Undertaking?
Insurance.
Oh dear.
So he made the mistake of believing that it's about selling. It's not about selling.
Well, not just that, but that's a very sexist comment as well, because if he'd have said that to my grandparents, my grandma, being a very senior civil servant and trailblazer in her day, was the breadwinner.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. When I recorded the audiobook, I wanted younger people to read it because, I'm in my 60s and I just wanted to know whether it resonated with young people. And the first person that listened to it was a woman called Scarlett. She's 22. She's a talent manager for a big brand, and her job is to look after the relationships with Instagram influencers, people with 200,000 followers plus. So she listened to it, and she came back to me and she wrote a detailed review of it, which was wonderful to read, actually. But a couple of things that she said that really stuck out for me. She said that I just loved the stuff you talk about etiquette. So if you go to dinners and all of this sort of stuff, how do you choose the cutlery? and the glasses and all of that. She said, I've never, very good. You've obviously been brought up proper. You have. But she said, nobody explains that anymore. So she said, it's a social skill that people of my generation don't have. And the other thing that I talk about in Meet, Greet and Prosper, to your point, Liz, is that it wasn't about sexism. It was about diversity and racism. And she said, I grew up in a white middle class environment. And when I came to London to work, I was dealing with people that, completely different to me. And she said, it's so easy to say or do the wrong thing without realizing you've done the wrong thing.
Yes.
And she found the guidance in the audiobook to be particularly helpful.
Early career, because I was so wanting to be liked. I wish I'd had this mindset back then, and I was so thinking everyone else has got it and I haven't. That would, working in a place like Capital, when I'm a scummy little local DJ, it was like quite not traumatic, quite what's
intimidating,
the word? Eye opener,
daunting. Yeah, quite daunting.
Yeah.
I love what you said earlier, just before I forget it, about get there early so you can welcome, because that's quite empowering. If you're the welcomer, you're the one in charge. You
don't have to be the one in charge, but you can take on the role of being a host. And organizers usually love it. And it's a great way. You just meet everybody and they see you as a friendly face.
Yes, exactly. And engaging as well. I like it's interesting what you said about diversity and things like that, because when I first started my career, I'm the epitome of diversity. I grew up, on the one hand, you might argue, in a middle class white background, but on the other hand, it's a very diverse and ethnic minority background. And because half my family is Indian Iraqi, so and the other half is Anglo-English, Anglo-Jewish as well. But when I first went to work for the BBC, I had a very short contract with them, which is like 20 years ago. And they sort of said, well, you're not really very BBC. Now, I haven't particularly changed my outlook at all in those 20 years, because I've always been relatively content in my own skin, and I just think to myself, if I'm a civil person, it costs nothing to be civil, and I'm honest and I'm truthful, those are good hallmarks for a journalist. But now I'm the epitome of diversity, and they love the fact that I'm BAME in the BBC. So it just goes to show perhaps that there's a bigger drive for it, perhaps, or that people are more accepting of all our different cultures.
Yeah, and rightly so. I mean, it's about time, really, isn't it? So, what I've tried to do is to give people practical tips and ideas that they can apply, perhaps even if it's just to give them that initial confidence to say, okay, bite the bullet, go out. What's the worst that can happen? Somebody doesn't want to talk to you. And that's issues that they've got, probably. It's not about you. So,
now, tell us again your website where we can find this audiobook, and I shall stick up the details.
Right, meetgreetandprosper.com. It will take you to where you can listen to, you can listen to me even more. So I feel I've been going on a bit today.
A copy of this.
Not at all.
Putting that on the screen. I think Liz has to go soon, by the way. So Liz, you duck out when you have to. I'm reading Paul McKenna's new book as well, called Success for Life. And I don't know if you're familiar with...
Greet, not great. Meet, greet, and prosper.
Bear with me a second.
And
sorry, Neil.
7 in NLP speak, super states, which is our internal states of being, and how to cultivate these to be most successful in the world today. Brilliant leading edge stuff. Guess what one of those super states is?
Go on.
Connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's right up there. Can I tell you the story?
Before you do, I'm going to say thank you very much to Roy and to Neil this afternoon. I do need to duck out because I've got to go back to work, but I hope we hear from you again, Roy.
Great. Lovely to meet you, Liz.
See you again soon.
Bye.
Thanks, Liz. I've just got to share this with you. The worst opening line I ever heard. I went to a talk, and it was in a local church of all places, and it was, what was his name? Jonathan Aitken.
Jonathan Aitken. The MP.
He got in trouble, didn't he? He went to prison. Do you remember? And it was a talk about, how he found religion in prison and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, it might be quite interesting. So I went along to that lovely church, all candlelit. And this guy It just came into my head when you said the worst opening line. I think I can beat your insurance one. This is awful. He said to me, for opening line was, would you like some cheese? And I said, no, thank you. Because it was like little, stubs of cheese there, and it was nice. And then he said, I don't know what you're doing here, but I'm just here to avoid eternal torment.
Did it lead to a conversation?
No, it led
Right.
to me edging away and getting the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah.
What a line. What a line. Meetgreetandprosper.com. Anything else you'd like to share about the book? I'm going to get myself a copy of this. And by the way, I think there's someone in your network that would benefit me, so I might be emailing you later.
All right. Well, now it's funny you mentioned Capital. I mean, Paul McKenna was at Capital, obviously. Russ was at Capital. I never used to listen to Russ because I was actually on TV on breakfast time doing the local travel and stuff. Yeah. But when they're on Euston Road, back in the day, I used to go in almost every Friday afternoon to voice commercials for a brilliantly enthusiastic, young and talented copywriter called Phil Higginson. But that was like a very, very long time ago.
Quite the building to work in, wasn't it? It was very exciting. People were made and broken there. It was quite the place. But then it moved to Leicester Square. But Leicester Square, much more central, and they needed it for profile. But it never quite had the magic of the Euston Tower, in my opinion.
Well, it's a little bit similar to when I was at the BBC at Lime Grove. It's now a housing block for a housing association. Everybody hated Lime Grove when it was there, but now it's gone. We all miss it terribly. But no, what I would say in summary, actually, Neil, is, if you know anybody who's starting out in their career, I'm not suggesting that they buy my ebook or the audiobook. That's not what I'm saying.
I will. I'll say it for you. Yeah. Fantastic. Buy the book.
But it really is about helping people realize at this critically important part in their life that connections are hugely important. And as we enter the next phase of evolution for AI and stuff, human connection, I think, is going to become more important, not less important. There are so many robust processes for recruitment in large companies, but the future is about smaller companies, and entrepreneurship and self-employment, freelancing is on the up, and your connections become the absolute lifeline that you will need to have for years to come. So if you're starting a business, your first investors are going to come from people that you know and people who know you, rather than walking into a Dragon's Den type environment where nobody knows you or cares about you.
It all sounds very fascinating. I'm definitely going to have a copy of this book, and I'm going to read that. Meetgreetprosper.com. You can listen to the first bit, and then hopefully, definitely buy the book. What's next for you? What's next?
Well, I'm actually I'm semi-retired, so I'm still doing conferences. I mean, I do massive events and things like this. This is my office. Okay. That's the Hamburg.
You're just showing off now, aren't you?
Yeah, I know. But I still do a bit of that, and I'm working with an orthopedic manufacturer at the moment with some surgeons. So I'm doing a course with them to show them how to accelerate their career using impact and networking and presentation skills and stuff like that. So that keeps me mentally stimulated, which is good. And just literally starting the promotion of Meet, Greet and Prosper globally. So who knows whether people will find it interesting or not. I think they will.
I think people will realize the importance of the message as well. I think, like you say, it's about time. You look at all the stress in the workplace, all the burnout, all the da-da-da-da-da. Clearly, we're not doing something right. And maybe this is a very timely solution.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for saying that. And it's been a pleasure. And I'm really pleased that you managed to sort out all of the tech initially. It's terrible when you're streaming, isn't it? Where you don't quite know what is going on and you're live at the same time. I remember from my old analog BBC days, you never knew what was going to happen. At least then you had technicians who would help sort it out.
I know. Yeah. Now you don't have to go yet, by the way. We've got about another 5 minutes. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Tell us one of your best BBC stories from back in the day.
Oh, there are so many. I mean, I used to be at breakfast time at Lime Grove, and it was back in the day when Jeremy Paxman and the dearly beloved Frank Boff were the presenters,
Yeah.
and also Jill Dando. Jill was a mate of mine. In fact, when we were at breakfast time, we had a BBC Breakfast Time Cuddle Club, and there were only 3 members. So, you meet at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it's a stupid time in the morning. And there was me, Jill, and a lady called Mary. Mary was the tea lady at the BBC. And the 3 of us would just have a morning cuddle to start the day off, And one day, somebody who was a very well-known celebrity wanted to join the club. And all 3 of us said no. So Jeremy Paxman was never allowed to join the club. But I'll tell you my best story. And this is a true story. We had so many guests come in. I mean, huge celebrities. And one day I was chatting to a little old lady who was chain smoking in the green room. So that will tell you how long ago it was when you were allowed to smoke indoors.
Yeah.
And, she was there, for quite a few different interviews on the same topic. And at the end of the session, she left. We all went back to makeup to have those slap all taken off and everything. And there were people in the makeup room who said, "Oh, wasn't she utterly amazing? She's so fantastic and so wonderful." And I actually said these words out loud. This is honestly the truth. I said, because I've been chatting to her all morning, I said, "So who is Audrey Hepburn?" How embarrassing is that?
Oops.
It was in that moment, actually, I realized I really do need to get out more.
You need to start networking, clearly. Maybe that was the beginning of it all.
Well, it was actually, in all seriousness, I realized that I had a very interesting opportunity when I was at the BBC, and I met so many people, and everybody in broadcasting has got these stories. I mean, one other brief story. I was watching TV one night, and there was this very beautiful young woman being interviewed about her singing career. And I just thought, what an incredibly beautiful woman, high cheekbones and just amazing. And then her name came up on the bottom of the screen, and I nearly fell out my chair.
Go on.
Because the last time I saw that person, she was 7 years old. She was colouring in a colouring book in the kitchen of her house in St. Margaret's, Twickenham. And her name was Sophie Ellis-Bextor.
Wow.
Because I knew her dad, Robin Bextor, who had been a producer and a director, and his partner then, Polly. I never met their Sophie's mother, Janet Ellis, a former BBC Blue Peter presenter. But I was utterly gobsmacked. I just couldn't believe it.
Oh, we play Sophie Ellis-Bextor records regularly at Radio Jackie. She's great.
She's kind of local to you. She's not that far from you. Is she just up the river? Well, that's if she's still living in that neck of the woods.
Yeah, no, I think she has a show on Radio 2, doesn't she? The Kitchen Disco.
Yeah, so it's a very small world. And I think that when you're in broadcasting, you do meet a lot of people and you don't realize what a privilege it is while you're doing it. I left broadcasting 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But I come back to the same thing. I said it earlier on. We're talking about all of these connections, but it applies equally with any other field that you are in. It doesn't only relate to broadcasting.
No, not at all. And I think people need to realise that. I think, oh, yeah, it's all right for those broadcasters. That's what they do. But it applies everywhere. And it's not any more difficult, I would say, in other places. Just because people don't have the, I suppose, broadcasting skills necessarily doesn't mean, that means they need to do it even more. This is where the world of broadcasting can contribute, maybe by teaching people these skills to talk and gain rapport and all these sorts of wonderful things. It's been a great conversation, Roy. Thank you.
Oh, good. I'm glad that you found it interesting and stimulating.
Really, really interesting. And it just validates everything that I've kind of been formulating in my mind relatively recently, about
and not necessarily analyzing it. People do it, but they don't think about it. But when you think about it, you realize that how massively important it is in a career or in your social life. You know, the number of people I've met who, you know, have met their partners through a mutual friend, or they've got new opportunities in the world of business or whatever because of a serendipitous little conversation.
And they do happen serendipitously. I think there is a thing called serendipity or synchronicity or whatever you call it. And it always seems
serendipity is based on a story by the Princes of Serendip. And it is all, yeah.
I never knew that. I know synchronicity comes from Carl Jung's work, but that's about all I know about it. But it means meaningful coincidence, and it does seem to be a thing. But it's always kind of effortless. It's not, again, there's no struggle to it. It organically unfolds, but in a way that you could never have predicted. You could never work it out. You couldn't orchestrate it in a million years, and yet it happens so easily. I think that's...
Well, you say you can't orchestrate it. That's true. But if you don't go there in the first place, it's never going to happen.
Yeah,
I mean,
you need to win a chance at the lottery, yeah.
Yeah, I have a very dear friend. She had a year of yes. She said yes to everything, but she said, except when men ask you things. Oh. But the year of yes, it just opens up those sorts of opportunities that, you know, wouldn't have happened otherwise, perhaps.
No, and it is interesting. It really is interesting. Roy Shepherd, thank you so much for being on the Midday Show. It's been a privilege and an honour. Come back and see us again, please. Keep in touch. To. And good luck with the new book. If you're interested, it's meetgreetprosper.com by my esteemed guest, Mr. Roy Shepherd. Thanks, Roy.
Cheers. Bye-bye now.
Good afternoon. Thank you.